We're ready.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark from City Church here with my fireside chat joke time. So, Warsaw is a vibrant city. It's always changing. Did you hear that a new store opened up in Warsaw for Legos? It's a brand new Lego store. And when it first opened, people were lined up for blocks.
We continue on from our stay in Corinth last week. It was from Corinth that Paul wrote the letter we're going to spend some time in today. From Corinth, we head to Athens, then to the town of Berea, and on to Thessalonica, today's Thessaloniki. For well over 2,000 years, this city has been the most important city in Macedonia. Under the Kingdom of Macedonia, that's the time of Alexander the Great, basically, it was the capital city. And then under the Romans, it was the capital of the Roman province of Macedonia. And it continued to be a major city even through the Byzantine Empire until its fall in 1430. It was named after Thessalonica, the half-sister of Alexander the Great, by her husband, King Cassander of Macedon. Now, Paul arrived in Thessalonica around 50 AD after leaving Philippi, which we'll visit next week. And we aren't sure exactly how long he spent there, but we know that he set up shop to work as the tent maker that he was. And Luke tells us that he reasoned in the synagogue for at least 3 Sabbaths. As in other cities he visited, that was often the place that he would start before meeting somewhere else, sometimes after being kicked out of the synagogue. Now, we know he had enough time to be instructing them as a young church would need, Early Church 101, and to appoint some people as leaders of this new community. Then, some people in the city decided to cancel Paul. They told the rulers of the city, a free city under the Romans, but still responsible to the emperor, that Paul was proclaiming Jesus as a rival to Caesar. At the same time, a group of Jewish agitators got a crowd worked up into a mob, and they couldn't find Paul, but they grabbed his host Jason and took him before the city authorities, telling them that he and his companions were plotting against the emperor. Now, this was a very serious charge and had to be taken as such by the rulers. Luke tells us, and the people in the city authorities were disturbed when they read these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. Now, Paul's friends hustled him and Silas, and probably Timothy as well, out of town in the middle of night and sent him off to Berea, not too far away, but far enough. Today's Veria. And he spends a bit of time there, and he does see some success in persuading people to follow Jesus. Luke writes this. Now, these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Many of them therefore believed, with not a few Greek women of high standing as well as men. But when the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was being proclaimed by Paul at Berea also, they came there too, agitating and stirring up the crowds. So his new friends take Paul to the sea, they put him on a boat and take him to Athens, while Silas and Timothy stay in Berea. Now, Paul waits in Athens for Timothy and Silas, whom he has asked to come as soon as possible. And he spends some time there and arguing, and you can read more about that in Acts. And then he heads to Corinth, where he spends about 18 months. While there, he meets some Jews that had been expelled from Rome by Claudius, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, there were the Jews being expelled from Rome. And these ones shared the same trade as Paul. So he stays with them, and they work together. Now, at some point, probably fairly soon, Paul gets word of how things are going in Thessalonica, likely a report from Timothy. And he hears that they are undergoing persecution and hardship, but they're continuing to live the way that Paul had instructed them. And he says, "And you became imitators of us and of the Lord when you received the message with joy that comes from the Holy Spirit despite great affliction. As a result, you became an example to all the believers in Macedonia and Achaia." That's mostly what is Greece now. "For from you the message of the Lord has echoed forth, not just in Macedonia and Achaia, but in every place reports of your faith in God have spread, so that we do not need to say anything." Paul says, even with the persecution that they have had to endure, they stood fast. Their faith has not wavered. But being a young church, they still did have some challenges that Paul did not have enough time to walk them through when he was there. So now he's addressing them by letter, playing catch up. So he encourages them for the report he's gotten about them, probably from Timothy again. He takes time to explain their abrupt departure, why they left the way they did, as it seems some people were suggesting that Paul had abandoned them when things got a little too hot. He reminds them of how they conducted themselves when they were in Thessalonica, how they had worked to pay for their own expenses so as not to be a burden to the new community. Now, part of the reason Paul goes to such pains, if you go read the second chapter of this letter, is religious and philosophical charlatans were very common around the Mediterranean. Now, he's distinguishing himself and his companions from those that would be looking to make a name for themselves, living off the people they're teaching and telling them what they wanted to hear, all for financial benefit. Now, there were almost certainly some voices in Thessalonica, inside or outside the community, we don't know, that were suggesting that Paul and company were charlatans in this way. He continues to encourage them, and we come to this in chapter 4. Now, concerning brotherly love, You have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. He says you don't need anyone to tell you this because you're already doing it. Even saying you have been taught by God to love one another, as in you are showing that God has changed you because of how you are doing that. Now, this is a mixed group of people, some Jews, some Gentiles. The Jews had a culture in which family ties were strong. So taking the concept of loving others, loving your brother, and transferring that to seeing fellow believers as family wasn't a huge jump. It fit within their cultural understanding and framework. But when you look at the Greco-Roman cultures, this was not the case. They were more individualistic. So Paul is emphasizing the idea of loving your brother, as in loving the fellow Christ follower, again and again. When you read the account of the early church in Jerusalem in Acts 2, it's not a communist commune. It's their understanding of being a family. So they are sharing what they have and doing life very close together, like a family. Do you remember when you first started following Jesus? You've probably seen others at the stage too, and it reminded you of this. You were so energized and so excited. All you wanted to do was to be around your fellow Jesus followers. Nothing else in the world really mattered at that moment. But what often happens in those moments is family relationships are neglected and friends you had before seem less interesting to you. So while one might not make a conscious decision to cut off those relationships, they end up being slowly strangled. We almost feel like we're on a high and we're switched on, and being around your family members or old friends is just bringing you down. They're total buzzkills. So we essentially remove ourselves from that world. But that's not what we're called to do as followers of Jesus. So Paul could say, everybody spread out, social distance yourselves from one another. But that probably wouldn't be healthy either. We are brothers and sisters having been adopted into God's family. So he tells them, great, you're loving each other very, very well. Keep it up. This is more than happy clappy love too, by the way. He says, concerning brotherly love, phileo, he actually says Philadelphias. And if you know anything about the city Philadelphia, that sounds very strange. But the city is actually called the city of brotherly love because of its name. Then when he says, taught by God to love one another, Paul switches to agape love, unconditional love that he's talking about. He literally says something like, God has taught you how to love one another unconditionally. Now they could say to each other at this point, through highs, through lows, for good times and bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. Keep smiling, keep shining, knowing you can always count on me for sure. It's that kind of love. They're loving each other so much this way that literally churches in other cities in Macedonia and Achaia have heard about it. For that indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing it well, he's saying. Paul is teaching the example of Jesus. John wrote of Jesus, having loved his own who were in the world, he now loved them to the very end. To the very end. The very end. Extreme love. Not just as long as he could or as long as he felt like it. The farthest extent of their need and his grace. It's these kind of things that people pay attention to. We talk about people wanting a sense of community. I wonder, though, if we could even say that people are looking for a sense of family. Especially when you see how many people come from broken or highly dysfunctional families. People want to be a part of loving relationships. But loving each other in this way is only half of what they're called to do. If the focus is only on unconditionally loving those on the inside, they aren't going to care very much about those on the outside. And that is a problem. I think it's what we humans default to. Anytime we gather together in an organized way, we create insider language, insider customs, such that anyone on the outside wouldn't have a clue how to understand them. That's something we've spent a lot of time in the last 4 years at City Church working on continuously. Anytime we use insider language or do insider customs, we explain them so that those who consider themselves outsiders can understand them. None of those things that we do or talk about are bad. They just happen, but they can become stale to insiders even so that they don't even realize or understand them anymore themselves, or by overusing them without explanation, we can create barriers to those who are seeking God. For the second part of their calling, he gives them a few more instructions, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we have instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. People are watching you, he says. There is no private behind closed doors, keep it to myself. it's personal faith. That's usually given as an excuse to avoid offending anyone. But in reality, in most of the places that we live, most people are not going to be offended by you simply being a Jesus follower. You are called to more than that. You are called to be lights in a dark world. So Paul lists a few ways that they should do this. The first command, aspire to live quietly, or more explicitly, make it your ambition to be quiet. He's not talking about volume here. He's not asking them to talk more quietly. Keep it down. It's quiet hours. This is more to do with how you would carry yourself, avoiding agitated, excitable, and restless preoccupation with things that mark Christians as out-of-step quacks, rather than followers of Christ in step with the Spirit. In the Thessalonians' case, stop me if any of this sounds familiar, based on some other parts of his letter, some of them may have developed a rather unhealthy preoccupation with the second coming of Jesus. Some of them so eager and expectant for him to return, thinking he'd be back any day now, quit their jobs, told people the end was near, spending the rest of their time looking for signs that Jesus was about to return. Growing up in the 80s and 90s in the Evangelical Church of North America made me never want to hear about end times prophecies ever again. It was obsessive, all-consuming, and in the end, it was paranoid with a persecution complex. Good times. This is similar to what some of the Thessalonians were doing, so Paul tells them to knock it off, in a nice way. Stop obsessing about something that you don't know when it will occur. You're doing really well with loving one another. Keep doing that. The second thing he says is to mind their own affairs. Be diligent, attentive, and faithful to the duties that you have in work and family. Those things that are your business. Don't quit your job and put your family on the streets or put unnecessary stress on the rest of the community who would now need to care for you. Paul says again and again through his letters for people to do whatever they do for the glory of God. Do it as though they are doing it for him, personally. Your job is not less spiritual or less important to your Heavenly Father. You bring glory to him by doing it well and with integrity. And third, Paul tells them to work with their hands. It seems as though this is a problem for some of the members of the young church, as Paul needs to address this again and more directly in his next letter to them. Being lazy and neglecting your responsibility gives Jesus and his church a bad name. So be busy about your Father's business, which includes doing your job well, caring for your family, and loving your spiritual brothers and sisters unconditionally. Sometimes jobs are lost. Sometimes sickness or pandemics can really mess things up. In those cases, the community should help out as much as possible. There's no shame in any of that, either receiving help or giving help. But we should not become leeches living off the kindness of hardworking brothers and sisters. In fact, you should be working hard to help others out when they need it instead. And then Paul brings it home with this. Walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. Others are watching, he says, so conduct yourself in diligence, in love, and in wisdom. Others are listening, so speak with words of grace and wisdom. No holier than thou attitude which just puts people off. Individuals are important. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Can you imagine how much better we might interact with those who aren't yet followers of Jesus if we listened first rather than tell? How much more would people's hearts be opened by us asking questions and caring for them instead of trying to force them across a line of faith prematurely? We are whole beings and we are God's agents on this earth. If we simply focus on the supernatural and neglect our responsibilities here, we are telling God we don't want to do what he's asked. Imagine a family in which everyone has responsibilities, clearly stated, clearly requested. We have some of those in my house. Friday is cleaning day. It's my wife's favorite day of the week, so much so that she sings about it on Thursday. I mop floors in the kitchen and bathrooms, the kids clean up their rooms, and so on. But imagine if one person in the family says, forget it, I'm not doing that, I'm waiting. You say, really? What are you waiting for? They say, Jesus. You say, did he text you that he's on his way? They say, well, no. You say, well, then how about while you wait, you do the things you know you're supposed to do? Because when he does come, you'll know. You aren't going to miss it. There were some Thessalonians that began to wonder if they had missed it. You won't miss it. We must be about our Father's business. Our Father's business does not include obsessive preoccupation with end times prophecy and when the day of the Lord will be. It does not include engaging in foolish gossip. It does not include acting paranoid or having a persecution complex. It does not include indulging in grandiose political conspiracies based on secret knowledge that only a few million people possess. All those things prevent us from doing what Jesus commanded us to do, to love one another as he loved us. Let us be about our Father's business. Our Father's business includes pursuing truth even when we don't like the result. It includes what we are already doing for work. It includes caring for your family. It includes caring for your spiritual brothers and sisters. It includes making money and paying bills. It includes speaking with grace and practicing wisdom. It includes caring for individuals, not making them targets for conversion. It includes sharing the good news of what Jesus has done for us with others in love as God works on their heart, drawing them closer to him. That is wisdom, and that is love.
This is love, not that we love God, but that He loves us. This is love, not that we love God, but that He loves us. We're the beloved, we're the beloved, we're the beloved of God. This is love, not that we love God, but that He loves us. And this is love, not that we love God, but that He loves us. We're the beloved, we're the beloved, we're the beloved of God. And we love because don't you know that we love because He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us, He first loved us, oh, He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us, He first loved us, yeah, He first loved us. We're the beloved, we're the beloved, we're the beloved of God. We're the beloved, we're the beloved, we're the beloved of God. And this is love, He first loved us.
Hey everyone, we hope you enjoyed our video today. Before you go, would you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and even turn on the bell for notifications when we post videos like this and other content as well. Did you do it? Great. Now go check out Mosaic Kids.